Remember when we made this render utility and it was really awesome because we were able to share a bunch of common stuff between our tests? Well, as I've been writing this, I've been noticing that we have some more common stuff between most of these tests that might be nice to abstract away into a abstraction within this test file. So all of the tests that are rendering the book screen could probably benefit from some level of abstraction. And so we're going to start with this one right here, and we'll see what we can put in here that's reasonable, that makes sense for what we're trying to accomplish. So I'm going to make a function called render book screen, and we're going to paste this in here. And this is going to need to be an async function, of course, because we're using await. And here we can create the book, make the route, and then render the app with the route. And then we can come back down in here, and anywhere where we're doing exactly that, we can say await, render book screen, and that refactor should do us really nicely, except for the fact that we need the book. So let's return the book. And we'll return it as part of an object because there are probably other things that we're going to need. So we'll destructure the book. And down here, it looks like we don't need the book, so we're fine with that. And our test should continue to pass. That was a pretty standard refactor right there, so we didn't really do anything super dangerous or whatever. But down here now, we need to start creating users. And so if we want to use that same utility, then we're going to need to do await render book screen. And we can get back from that our user and our book. And let's bring this back up here. And we'll paste this in place of what we had before, because this is actually doing more than what we were doing before. And get rid of what we had before. Now it looks like we're not only passing the route, but we're also passing in a user. So this render method won't make its own user. We'll create our own by ourselves. And then here we're also creating a list item that's associated to the user and the book, but that's going to break this test right here because we actually don't need a list item. In fact, we don't want a list item for this test or this test. So I think a good API for this would be to say, hey, this is going to render a regular book screen, except I want the list item to be null. So I don't actually want the list item to be specified. So I'm going to take that as an option. We'll default that to an object here. We'll destructure the list item, and then we can say if list item is undefined, then we'll go ahead and create it. Otherwise it's null, or it's maybe provided, and so that's the one that we should use instead. So here I'm going to assign the list item to that await there, and let's add the list item here, and for completeness we'll add the user as well. And to make this even more complete, let's go ahead and add the utils that we get back from render, and we'll forward those along as well. And you know, it would make sense to me that I should be able to pass in a user or a book for each one of these tests as well. So let's just do the same thing for both the user and the book, where we can say if the user is undefined, then we'll create that user. And then here, if the book is undefined, then we'll create that book. So let's save that, and hopefully we didn't break anything, but it's quite possible we did. So here we have user is already been declared, and that's happening around line 99. So let's come down to that line, and yep, right there, we're awaiting render book screen because we built in all of this stuff into there. So now we can get rid of that. And it looks like we don't even care about the user or the book anyway, so we can just await render book screen. And let's save that and make sure that our tests compile and pass. And it looks like they are not passing, so let's figure out what's going on with this second test. So here we can create a list item for the book. I think I know what's going on. We need to say we want a list item of null. So we don't want a list item. So this is saying to the reader, hey, I want to render a book screen, but for this test, it's important that the list item is null. And it turns out I just broke this one because I put that on the wrong test. So let's pull that out and put that back up here. There we go. And for this one, it's important that it's a regular book screen. So let's go ahead and add this same utility to all of these places. So it looks like for this one, we actually need a specific list item. And what we need is for the finish date to be set to null. And if we dive into the build list item, then we'll see that the default finish date is going to be set somewhere between the start date and now. And so we need to make sure that we set that finish date to null. And there are a couple ways we could go about this. We could say render book screen, and we could pass the user, the book, and the list item. And that would actually work out okay. This should pass our test, no problem. But another thing that we could do is we could add an await list items db update. We'll pass the list item .id and the update we want to make, which will be finish date of null. And then we don't need to worry about passing any of this. We can grab the list item that was created for us and get rid of all of that. And that will make our test pass as well. I'm going to stick with this because I like that we're able to reuse all of the stuff that we've got in the render book screen, and we're communicating just as effectively that for this test to function, and what we're actually trying to test here is that we have a list item that has no finish date. So let's go to this last one here where we're doing a bunch of the same old stuff, and we're going to await render book screen. And we don't really need to customize this in any way. So we'll just say render book screen. And oh, actually it looks like we do in fact need the list item. So let's grab that and we'll save this. And now with this render book screen, we got that list item. All of our tests should be passing. So in review, what we did here is identify some similarities between the tests that we had in this file and made an in-file utility that we could use across all of our tests. So we have this render book screen that will accept user, book, and list item. And if those are provided, that's great. If they're not, then we'll create them ourselves, and then we'll forward them along to the render function that is a generic render function for all of the tests in our app. It handles ensuring that you're logged in as a user and ensuring that you're on the right page and that your component is wrapped in all of the providers that it's going to be wrapped in when you ship this component to production. So with this composition of utilities, we have some tests that are pretty easy to understand. We just say, hey, I'm going to render a book screen. This book screen has a book that doesn't have a list item, and this is what that book screen should look like. And then for this one, hey, I'm rendering a book screen as well. This one doesn't have a list item, so this is what it should look like and how it should behave for a book that doesn't have a list item. And then for this one, it's a regular book screen, it has a list item. Pretty normal situation. We're going to remove that list item. And here we're going to mark it as red, and so on and so forth.